is Kimberley Robinson and I'm the founder of Keep Real, which is a mental health business for good here in Yorkshire, and welcome to my creative coping mechanism workshop. I hope it will support you in understanding why your mental health needs a little bit more TLC during these strange and difficult times, and you can explore some really wonderful creative ways of coping when you're faced with days that are just a little bit harder than others. So let's begin. First and foremost, mental health is important. We all have it, and it's about how we navigate that importance and sharing those methods of coping that determines how we move forward personally, professionally, and as a society as a whole. It can be really hard to understand and navigate how best to cope with difficult feelings and emotions and events that happen to us. Sometimes it's just hard to articulate it, and sometimes the way that we can express ourselves and understand what we can do to cope is through expressing ourselves non-verbally. So that can be through free flow writing, being artsy, doodling, playing guitar, something that expresses you as a person. And sometimes that can be a little bit easier than verbalizing how you feel. So you don't have to be artsy to take part in any of these activities that I talk about, but it is important to understand that there is no right or wrong in trying lovely creative ways of coping out. Art is meant to be expressive and funky and weird and experimental, so never feel like you're doing things wrong. So you just need to embrace it the best you can. And what I love about being creative anyway is when it comes to supporting my own mental health, as well as the workshops that I run, it's about how we all approach the same thing differently. We all have our own weird ways of doing things, and being sensory in the way that we work, it allows us to slow down, slow our pace, and truly helps us to manage and cope better. So I hope that you get something out of this with some of my top tips today. One of the first exercises that I love to do is something called free flow writing, which I mentioned earlier in the introduction. So free flow writing is basically whatever comes to mind and you write it down, but it can be a little bit more guided than that. So grab a piece of paper, grab a pen. You can do it on your phone, but I really don't. I like the analogue way of doing things. So grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, and let's get started. So any old notebook or any piece of paper will do. It can be a huge A3 sheet, it can be a really tiny notebook like this one. And all you need to do is do something a little bit guided. So for example, start with a sentence that says, "I am feeling," or "today I am feeling," which in itself, we don't really ask ourselves this question enough. Sometimes we have such dips and peaks and troughs of how we feel day to day, but sometimes we wake up in the morning and maybe we feel a little bit weird, maybe we feel a bit off, and this is a great technique to understand how you're coping and how you're feeling so you can better do something. And it's a really good exercise. So if you write down, "Today I am feeling," and then give yourself a few minutes to write down that response, and it doesn't have to make sense. A lot of people, when they do this exercise, in the past workshops that I've done, especially at the universities, we've done this exercise and people have been like, "Oh, I don't really know how I feel about writing things down." But then afterwards, they actually reflect on what they've written and feel almost some people feel a sense of relief, some people feel like, okay, I didn't really know that's the way that I was feeling. But it's a really good coping mechanism and a way of understanding and regulating your emotions. And sometimes it's hard to verbalise, but sometimes it's a little bit easier to write it down. This exercise is a great tool to use in the everyday, even if you're out and about and you want to write down some notes on your phone, or you're in halls and you're just stuck on what to do and you're not feeling great. This is a great way of understanding what you are feeling and how you can best cope with it. When you've written it, just pause, take a moment and just read through what you've put down, and then understand what kind of words that you've used. Also, you could use different statements, so it doesn't have to be "today I'm feeling." Maybe it's "this week has been," or "university makes me feel like." It's those little guided statements that allows you to really think about how you're feeling at the moment. Another way that I like to cope when I'm having a really hard time, which really works, is art therapy. So when I did my degree 5 years ago in counselling, we did an art therapy session. We did a couple of art therapy sessions, and I absolutely loved it because it wasn't something that I was open to, even though I'm quite an artsy person, and I thought it was just for arty people, which is completely not true. Art therapy is just another non-verbal way of communicating how you feel and expressing that. So if you've got some coloured pencils to hand, awesome. If not, just use a biro. It doesn't have to be anything colourful and weird, but if you do have it, feel free to. So I have grabbed a lovely big A3 piece of paper. Now, when you are faced with a blank piece of paper, it can be feeling a little bit daunting. You know what? Art therapy is cool and weird and funky and wrong and right at the same time, so feel free to just explore how you feel. Now, when I have a load of colours in front of me, it can be a little bit intimidating, but I just go to what I'm gravitated to. So, pink, I'm not really gravitated to that today. I'll go with purple. What I like to do is create shapes with that colour. Now, it doesn't really have to mean anything, but it's something that allows me to just keep busy, cope. If I'm having a bit of a bad time and I'm getting repeated thoughts or feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I will literally just scribble till I feel a little bit better. So I'll show you my piece of paper while I do it with you. So what I like to do is just create some shapes. It honestly doesn't have to make sense. Okay, and you don't have to fill the whole piece of paper, but I just like to do that when I start. This is just me having a bit of a doodle, and sometimes that really helps too. And when I see little blocks of colour, like little gaps if you like, I'll do something in there. And I like to be quite mindful with the colours that I use. Colours mean different things to a lot of people, and for me, when I learn, the way that I learn is that I do it in colour. Sometimes you can't make sense of things and thoughts, and sometimes when this happens, it almost verbalises it for me. Another way to cope is creating those sensory experiences that may not necessarily be happening right now for you, or not as much as you would like anyway. Lists of sensory experiences that are really good and soothing for you is really important to coping as well. Think about the following: environments or nature, sounds and music that you love, experiences or events that you've had that really do support you. It's about creating those lists and actually understanding what does help and what does make us feel good. And sometimes we go through life and we don't necessarily pick out those moments so easily when things are really hard. So creating that list for yourself is something really important, whether or not it's almost creating like a happy playlist on Spotify, or about general thoughts and feelings around nature and what your favourite things are. So that's a really good way of coping too. And so with that, I hope that you've gained some really cool, weird, creative ways of coping, because coping doesn't just have to be having to look good and feel like you've got things together. There are different ways of creating outlets for yourself that are safe and supportive, and you don't have to be an artsy type or creative person to feel like you can do that. So grab your pens and paper, grab your tokens, grab things that really do help in the everyday, and make a habit of it and try it. That's what I did, and that's what I learned doing my degree, and I hope it helps you too. Don't forget to check out the Feel Better Leeds site. It has some wonderful resources on there, so advice, signposting to services, and it's a great way to understand and take care of yourselves while you're at university or a young person in Leeds. So do check it out and feel better.